All right, let's dive into a really fascinating and honestly pretty intense figure from Western esotericism, Bartzabel. You hear him called the spirit of Mars, but what does that really mean? Let's unpack it. So, check out this line from a traditional invocation. It kind of lays it all out, right? You've got mighty spirit, intelligence of war and victory. I mean, that's pure raw power. But then immediately after that, it says, come forth in peace and friendship. See what's happening there? This isn't just about calling down some chaotic force. Right from the get-go, it's about setting terms. It's a formal negotiation with something incredibly potent. So, the big question is, what is Bartzabel? I mean, are we talking about a god, some kind of demon, or is it more of a psychological concept, like an archetype? Well, as you're going to see, the answer is, it really depends on your point of view. Okay, so first up, let's unpack Bartzabel's core identity. At its most basic level, Bartzabel is understood to be the martial intelligence of the planet Mars. You know, Mars, the planet all about conflict, raw energy, and drive. Now, this is a super important distinction to make. In ceremonial magic, Mars isn't just one thing. You have Bartzabel, who is the active, dynamic intelligence. He's the one who gets things done, who intervenes. Then you have Graphiel, who is the passive, receptive spirit. You know, a good way to think about it is like this. Bartzabel is the general on the battlefield, making the calls, leading the charge. Graphiel, he's the intelligence report, the strategic map the general is looking at. One is all about action, the other is all about the underlying information. And when you dig into the lore, and even modern accounts, you see a very clear personality emerge. This is not a subtle force. We're talking direct, immediate, often really dramatic results. People describe this energy as incredibly protective, but also very, well, hierarchical. It's almost like you're dealing with a high-ranking military official. You don't just wander in. You have to approach with a clear plan, show respect for authority, and if you do that, you can expect some pretty decisive action. All right, so we have this powerful, almost military-style spirit. But where did this idea even come from? Bartzabel didn't just pop up yesterday. No, this concept has a long, rich history and a very specific place in the whole cosmology of Western magic. You can actually trace the evolution of Bartzabel over centuries. It first starts appearing in those old medieval grimoires, the famous spellbooks. Then, during the Renaissance, thinkers like Agrippa start to systematize everything, giving it a more formal structure. Then you jump forward to the 19th and 20th centuries, and that's when magical groups like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn really flesh out the character and the rituals, shaping it into the entity most practitioners know today. And this is where it gets really cool. This is like its cosmic zip code. In Kabbalah, Bartzabel is tied to the sphere of Geborah, which translates to severity or strength. And just look at all the things connected to it. The divine name is Elohim Gibor, the god of battles. The archangel is Kamiel. The element? Fire. The metal? Iron. The color? Red. I mean, it all just clicks together perfectly. It's this incredibly consistent, fiery warrior package. Okay, so we've got the who and the where. But what about the why? What is Bartzabel actually for? How have people used this energy both back in the day and in our modern world? If you look back historically, the applications were pretty literal. I mean, this is the spirit of Mars, right? So people were calling on Bartzabel for victory in actual battle, for protecting soldiers, for winning intense legal fights, which, let's be honest, were basically a form of combat back then. It was all about getting a tangible advantage when things got physical and dangerous. And today, well, we've just adapted those same core ideas for the modern world. The battlefield might now be the corporate boardroom. Personal protection isn't necessarily for a soldier, but maybe for someone who needs to feel safe in a rough neighborhood. And that idea of courage and overcoming fear? Now it's often about building the psychological assertiveness to stand up for yourself and maintain healthy boundaries. So how do you actually interact with this kind of force? Well, you definitely don't just shout its name into the void. The method is incredibly structured, very formal. The military protocol analogy really works here. You don't just barge into the general's office. You start at the top with divine names. Then you go down the chain of command to the archangelic level. You connect with the planetary energy itself. Then you call Bartzabel by name. You state your intent, your mission, very clearly. And, this is crucial, you end with a formal dismissal, a license to depart. It's all about protocol, respect, and maintaining order. All of this formality and structure brings us to a really central and frankly fascinating question. When someone does this ritual, what are they actually contacting? Is it real? Is it in their head? The sources lay out three main ways of looking at this. First up, you've got the psychological model, often seen through a Jungian lens. From this point of view, Bartzabel isn't some spirit out there. Nope. Bartzabel is the warrior archetype inside you. It's a part of the human psyche that deals with courage, confrontation, and protection. So the ritual isn't about summoning an entity. It's a really potent psychological tool to awaken and access those resources you already have. Then there's the chaos magic perspective, which is all about pragmatism. The chaos magician basically says, does it work? Yes? Then who cares if it's real? In this model, Bartzabel is viewed as a powerful and consistent symbolic system, a tool. It's a framework you can use to focus your intent and achieve a specific outcome. It's all about the results. And finally, we have the traditional or spirit model view. This perspective says, hold on, it's not just in your head, and it's not just a tool. In this lens, Bartzabel is a genuine, independent spiritual intelligence, a real, non-human entity with its own consciousness that exists out there in the cosmos. And you're not just using it, you're building a relationship with it. So whether you see Bartzabel as an archetype, a tool, or a real entity, it doesn't really matter when it comes to this next part. Because no matter how you slice it, tapping into this kind of raw, martial power comes with some serious warnings and a whole lot of responsibility. And the texts, both old and new, are crystal clear on this. This stuff is not a game. If you're not careful, working with this energy can amplify any aggressive tendencies you already have. That protective instinct can curdle into full-blown paranoia. And that newfound assertiveness, it can easily become abrasive and start wrecking your personal relationships. You have to be incredibly self-aware. And that's exactly why the recommended approach is all about being discerning. It means doing your homework, being psychologically prepared, and treating the force with respect, not just as a tool to be used. You have to balance it out. The whole point isn't just to grab power for the sake of it. The real goal is to integrate these lessons, to develop a kind of virtuous courage. It's about building character, not just being a blunt instrument. So, in the end, it all boils down to this really provocative question. When you reach for a power like this, a power so tied to conflict and strength, are you truly on a path to transformation? Or are you just looking for a mirror, a way to amplify and justify the aggression you already have? Ultimately, it seems the answer isn't in the spirit or the archetype, but in the person asking.